about this, and I think this is just yesterday. The election's not a reality show. You're not Donald Trump, you're fired. You idiot, whatever. And I think the problem is, and this is something we could spend the full hour on, that what's the role of the press here? You get lied to, and pretty soon you call Trump or try to call him on every lie. You call him on some lies. The ones that you repeat 5 times, you call it on the 6th time. It is staggering. And the press is really struggling with this. I think the best people are doing very good jobs. I think a lot of other people aren't. We can look at someone like Matt Lauer, who had a bad night when Trump flat out lied once again about Iraq. But there are a lot of other people in the press as well. And this really relates to this notion of equivalence. That Hillary has some problems with the truth. Trump has a lot of trouble with the truth. Hence, they're relatively equivalent. We've got to try to treat one like the other. No! You know, that's the job of the press. And I'm not going to go on about this because it really could expand to, you know, obviously, if you had a journalism professor here, it would expand to a full hour. And it's a really important question, but it's just one. That's the thing, of dozens of questions. So, remember, as a theater, can you know, that's one element. Understanding Trump. Now, I got to say that Trump has been great for political science in a lot of ways. A lot of people who wouldn't have any role in analyzing a political campaign have been right in the middle of it. A lot of analysis of Trump as an authoritarian figure. Statistical analyses, a whole psychological profile of Trump as an authoritarian. I mean, I think when you get to, as someone said, he's not Hitler, but Mussolini, maybe, and Berlusconi, you know, as well. So again, I'm not going to go into this, but again, there's an entire industry of looking at Trump as an authoritarian figure, and I do think with the Trump facial expressions, you put him next to Mussolini, it's uncanny. Again, I'm not going to go into race and racism. I mean, this is part and parcel of this campaign. It's part and parcel of American politics, and so you're never very far away from race. Right. in American politics. Right. We certainly we've had it up close and personal, as I'd say, for the last 8 years. It remains part of the discourse in a variety of ways. And with racism, I'm also talking about ethnicity, etc. And we'll talk a little bit more about the details of that politically, but I think it has raised lots of issues, and there are, you know, any number of analyses of Trump as from a race perspective. Who would have thought? I mean, narcissism. Politicians have big egos. You don't have a big ego, you can't run for president. And Hillary Clinton has a big ego. McCain's got a big ego. Romney does. George W. Bush, strangely enough, does. You know, Clinton obviously does, and on and on. Yeah, it's not for the faint of heart. It's not for people who don't believe in themselves. Most politics is certainly, and you got to have a pretty strong ego to. But that doesn't mean you're a narcissist. And I think that it's been fascinating to watch Trump, you know, a true narcissist, operate as a presidential candidate. Everything comes back to me. I know more than the generals.
Yeah.
I'm so comforted by that. So again, it's not something I want to dwell on, but it's, again, we could spend, a psychologist could be here spending, the rest of the hour on Trump's narcissism. We got a businessman as president. There's kind of a Republican mantra there. We really need to have a businessman as president. There's no evidence that this works out. Sometimes, except randomly, sometimes it works. Romney was a pretty good governor. He's a business person. There have been other business people who've done adequately. There have been business people who've done badly. But most people don't get to try to do run for president as a quote business person because politics is a profession. You really need to be pretty good at it. And business people, by and large, have different skill sets. Now, that said, if Trump was a really good businessman, we might say, okay, here's a guy who brings some principles business principles to government, might make things more efficient. There's no indication here. Here's a guy, and you know the litany of stuff. He's been bankrupt X times. He now doesn't build hotels. He sells his name. He sells his brand to people to put on hotels all across the Middle East, which is a real problem. It turns out a variety of things. He does it in kind of sleazy ways, and so there's business there broadly defined, but it's certainly not anything about building anything right now, and hasn't been for quite a while. Finally, I'd simply say to go back to psychology. Pretty substantial evidence, along with narcissism, that Trump has an immense case of ADD. That he has no ability to concentrate. And the stories here are just legion. In the middle of a major TV interview, he's looking over another TV screen, checking what's on, simply not being, and you try to have a discussion, they'll flip the discussion back to himself. Just try to see if he can ever stays on something absent reading from a teleprompter, which he doesn't do very well, for more than 30 seconds. His biographer, or the guy who co-wrote The Art of the Deal with him and made a ton of money, is fascinating on this, that you couldn't have a regular conversation with Trump at all. So, all I'm saying here is that to understand Trump, we're not operating in conventional political terms often. We're operating in psychology, we're operating in cultural questions, but not necessarily in the political realm. And one of the ways you look at Trump, try to understand Trump, is through his supporters, the basket of deplorables. I think it's worth looking at Trump through his supporters, in terms of their birtherism. Most of them see Obama as a Muslim, don't think he's American. There's some bad data, but I'll throw it out there that in one poll, 20% of Trump supporters thought that slaves should not have been freed. But it turns out that's not a very good poll, and there was a fair percentage of, smaller, but still a percentage of Democrats who felt the slaves should not be freed. So sometimes one of the things that's happened in this election, happens in all elections, is you cherry pick data. And this is an election for cherry picking data of the first order on all sides. I think that the interesting question to think about right now, 55 days out from the election, is, was this bad politics for Hillary Clinton? And initially it looked bad. So this is like Romney's 47% figure of people who are not contributing to the economy, or takers, not providers, whatever. But Romney did that in private to a bunch of donor supporters. Hillary did this I think somewhat thoughtlessly, but maybe not, to LGBT community, was being filmed. She knew it. She'd used these terms before in public, but they weren't picked up on. And she walked it back slightly. She went, well, it's not half of his support. And then talked about the real problems facing many of Trump's supporters. But what's fascinating here now is the whole question of campaign narratives is really, if there was ever a campaign to try to look at the narratives rather than facts or anything, this is it. One of the things that's happened is that since you use a deplorable term, then reporters will go up to Trump, Pence, and others and say, well, so do you think X or X group is deplorable? And David Duke is the most notable example here. Mike Pence is saying, well, we've disavowed David Duke. Well, do you think he's deplorable? Well, I'm not going to go into categorizations. Okay, you cannot call David Duke, an avowed KKK candidate, a racist of the first water, someone who'd send every Muslim, every African American out of the country. You can't find him deplorable. In the end, I think Hillary may actually benefit from this discussion. Because she's saying, look, there's a lot of problems here. The Trump campaign gets asked. Whether that was, she's teed that ball up to be hit, I'm not sure. But that may be the way it's working out. So banning Muslims in the United States. The red line is Republicans strongly support, somewhat opposed, strongly opposed. Obviously, there are a few Democrats. 26% of Democrats would ban Muslims in the United States. So it's not something that 48% of all Republicans would ban Muslims from the United States. 44% of Democrats would oppose it. So you do. I mean, partisanship here does, definitely break down between the two parties. The perspectives break down. So, we could go on and on about the narcissism, attention deficit disorder. We could talk about the lack of policy. So yesterday, Trump said, we ought to do childcare. And he announced it. My daughter is she's just pushing me for childcare. Okay. So he does a childcare policy that's conventional. It's not unconventional at all, aside from the fact that there are probably not 10 Republicans in the Congress who support it. But he does it. And then the next question is, well, this is a modest program, not as substantial as Clinton's, but it's a real program. How are you going to pay for it? I don't know. That is what Republicans accuse Democrats of doing all the time. Oh, you've got pie-in-the-sky programs that you can't pay for. And Hillary says, well, I'm going to tax the wealthy a little more, and we're going to give mothers and fathers leave. And on and on. And finally, there was a great article yesterday about Trump's nest of advisors, and Kobach was characterized as one of them. I think it was the New Republic. And my wife is always on my case about, you're always on Facebook, and it's true. I'm it's a sickness. I will seek help after the election. But I get a staggering amount of information. My wife says, well, I get cat pictures on Facebook. And I say, well, man, I've got a lot of friends who post a lot of interesting stuff. And so there was a post yesterday on Trump's advisors. And you just started reading through the profiles. And granted, there was some snark. But this is the least conventional group of advisors you can possibly imagine. This is beyond strange. hardly any political veterans. Kellyanne Conway is now on board and a political veteran. Never run a campaign, never run a presidential campaign. But if you want to see one strange thing, if you look at the New Republic, ask Trump advisors, this story will pop up. There are great drawings, and one of them is Kobach and immigration. Okay, so we could go on, but let me just finish up. I'll run through these slides really quickly with some conventional analysis. So my argument is that even though in many ways this is a very strange election with Donald Trump, in many other ways it's quite a normal election. The other take here is, oh, this is a way different election. I would simply say, in terms of results and on the ground analysis, you may well go broke betting on number two. You might win, but I do think pretty conventional analysis will win out. So, as of today, Hillary Clinton leads. Her lead is shrinking. She leads narrowly in most battleground states, although there are a couple of polls today that suggest she might be losing Ohio, maybe even Florida. Single polls. Never go crazy on single polls. Whatever you do to relax, do some yoga, have a beer, whatever. But single polls should never drive you crazy. Several polls, you're allowed. She's got a whole variety of ways to get to 270 electoral votes out of 538, what you need to win the election. Trump's path is much more difficult. I had a friend on Facebook this morning who put up a map of Trump winning with 270 votes, winning both Ohio and Florida, and a bunch of other smaller states, and still has to win one district in Maine and Nebraska. You can split your electoral votes. One district in Maine to get to 270. It was a cogent possibility, but just that. So to look at this really briefly, you've got this. There are tons of maps out there. One of the problems this year is that when you go to a site, and they're really good sites, the New York Times has a good site, Real Clear Politics has a good site, but they all have interactive maps, which you can't easily download into a picture. So at least I can. But this is a good one. This is a good map, perfectly reasonable map of where the blue states, the red states, and then the toss-up states would be. I certainly wouldn't put Virginia in the toss-up category right now, nor Colorado. And that's one of the interesting parts of this election is that states that have previously been toss-ups may well not be. Other states that haven't been may well be. But it's a pretty conventional electoral map. You can go to Ohio, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Nevada, Florida, North Carolina, all the states that people talk about. And one of the reasons I would argue that we shouldn't get too taken away by the idea this is a completely different election is to look at elections past. And I apologize for, I made it as big as I could, but if you look at the last 4 elections, 2000, 2004, 2008, 2012, you get the West Coast, you get the Rust Belt states, you get the East Coast. Florida goes for Democrats the last 2 times. North Carolina went once. You begin to see the effects of Hispanic votes in New Mexico and Colorado. But there's some continuity. And indeed, I think you can go back a little bit even to Clinton in 1996. Very different map than, say, Reagan in 1984, McGovern, or look at the Carter coalition in 1976. The West Coast, no West Coast, and now we'd say Washington, Oregon, California, states that ordinarily under almost any circumstances would go Democratic. So you really do have some changes over time, but this is a very stable pattern over the last few elections. Republicans win these two. Well, they didn't really win 2000. And then Democrats win the last two. And we keep focusing on many of the same states. But Virginia, New Mexico, Colorado, probably Colorado, becoming very solidly Democratic. There are a bunch of traditional toss-up states. Trump wants to think that Pennsylvania is a toss-up. It doesn't look like that's going to be the case. Then you talk about Arizona and Georgia as possible toss-ups, largely because of non-white voting changes in population. So every election is different, but there's a lot of similarities. In terms of population, so I'm going to go run through really quickly some population groupings. Non-college white men. Red line is Republican, blue line is Democratic. So, for quite a while, 1980, Reagan Democrats. Democrats have not done very well with non-college educated white men. Clinton did better with them at first, even the second time. Trump is way back up there, so one of the problems for Trump is that he's not bringing over a bunch of old Democrats here. They've already gone. With Ronald Reagan, that bus left. Some of them came back to Clinton, but basically that bus has left the station 30 years ago, and certainly 15 years ago. What you have to do there is get more to turnout rather than just change their opinions. But very differently is college-educated white women. Big change in this campaign with college-educated white women. Usually a very competitive group. Sometimes Republicans win.